Turning now to the 2024 presidential race, this could be the week when either President Biden or former President Donald Trump earn enough delegates to clinch their party's nomination. Today, President Biden travels to New Hampshire. Both he and Trump rallied in Georgia ahead of tomorrow's pivotal state primary. The dueling rallies offered a glimpse of a November rematch as both candidates took the chance to send jabs at each other.
Our freedoms are literally on the ballot this November. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans are trying to take our freedoms away.
Joe Biden should not be shouting angrily at America. America should be shouting angrily at Joe Biden.
When he says he wants to be a dictator, I believe him.
On November 5th, the curtain closes on Crooked Joe's corrupt reign, and the sun rises on a brand new day for Georgia and for America.
Well, CBS News campaign reporter Taurean Small is in Atlanta to talk a little bit more about this. So, it looks like things are shaping up, obviously, to be a rematch of 2020. And you've seen the polling, Taurean, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, people are not particularly enthusiastic about a rematch with these two. I'm curious about how the candidates are tackling that. How are they sort of tackling making that connection with voters?
Yeah, that was one of the things we were gauging this weekend as we attended those two dueling rallies here in Georgia. By the way, this is the second month in a row both Donald Trump and Joe Biden were in the same state at the same time for a campaign event. But voters that we talked to said, listen, this isn't something that they're necessarily happy about. They wish they had more candidates to choose from, but they're playing for their winning team or the hopes that their team will win in November. I think what we're seeing, though, in the shift of messaging, President Biden has always looked forward to the general election, and he's picked up quite a bit of momentum after the State of the Union. He announced that he raised around $10 million after that speech ahead of his rally in Georgia. Donald Trump, though, is now able to shift his party, so the RNC's priorities, to focusing just on him, even though we're in the unofficial end game or the general election. Like you said, though, by Wednesday, both should have accumulated enough delegates to finally pick up the party nomination, but they're looking forward and they're shifting their message to focus solely on each other instead of their primary rivals. At least in Donald Trump's case, he had to contend with Nikki Haley until she was able to get knocked out following Super Tuesday.
So, as you know, topping the list of issues for voters is immigration, the situation at the border. The president spoke about it in his State of the Union address, but he used the word illegal when he was describing the suspected killer, the alleged killer of a Georgia nursing student, as opposed to undocumented. Got a lot of criticism from some in his own party about the use of that word. But this continues to be something that Republicans are sort of capitalizing on. As I understand it, former President Trump met with the family of Lincoln Riley over the weekend. Do we know how that went?
Yeah, so what's interesting, I think Trump is looking to make this a primary portion, at least in the early stages of this general election. His campaign, a senior campaign staffer told my colleague Olivia Rinaldi over the weekend that it's ridiculous the fact that Biden is now walking back that comment about a killer in his that's what he said, but he hasn't been as sympathetic to the family. Trump has been embracing of Riley's family. But we also heard Joe Biden over the weekend apologize for those words. This was after quite a few Democratic Congress people came forward and said that that's just, no matter the situation, it's inappropriate language to use the term illegal. So we've seen Biden shift to the word undocumented, hoping not to impact his standing or influence, especially with minority voters, as he has to do quite a bit of base building moving forward in order to recapture crucial battleground states just like Georgia in November.
Right. Taurean, thank you very much.